Our next speaker, Omar Santos from OASIS Open, will introduce the OpenEoX effort, a collaborative endeavor supported by leading entities such as Qualys, Cisco, Microsoft, Red Hat, Siemens, BSI, and CISA, alongside other industry stakeholders. The OASIS Open EOX initiative aims to revolutionize how end-of-life and end-of-support information is shared and managed across the software and hardware industries through a crucial standardization effort. Here to tell us more is Omar Santos.
Thank you, Shira, and thank you for Qualys for having me here today. My name is Omar Santos, as I was introduced, and today I want to start with a pretty busy agenda, but I want to introduce a problem that we're trying to solve with this concept called OpenEoX. And after we define the problem of end of life, end of support, and the lack of standardization around that, we're going to go over an overview of what is OASIS Open, what is the process of technical committees and open projects, and how this initiative works with other standards like SBOMs and the Vulnerability Exploitability Exchange and other artifacts that are crucial for security and vulnerability management nowadays. We're going to talk about, of course, the integration with software bill of materials, but also a roadmap. How do we see the industry moving towards more and more automation, and how even this plays with AI? As a matter of fact, the end of life and end of support dilemma, it actually does apply to AI, and we're going to explore that in the next few minutes. And then at the end, we're going to have a call to action. How can you get involved in this initiative and this standards technical committee? So with that, what is the problem? So the problem that we're trying to solve in here, it is the challenge that even if we have modern technologies like automation and artificial intelligence and so on, yet there's no standard way to know if a product, whether it's hardware, software, commercial or open source tools, are enough support. Whether even an AI model is actually supported or not. Nowadays that we actually are using generative AI pretty much everywhere, and open source models that you can grab from Hugging Face, there's no single indicator and standard way to determine whether these artifacts are end of life and end of support. That actually goes and applies to both hardware and software, as I mentioned to you. But if you look at the product lifecycle, you have, of course, the introduction of a product that can be, again, an open source, an open source piece of software. It can be a commercial product like Cisco products, Qualys, and so on. And then, of course, you always going to have the growth when that product gets introduced and then it reaches some maturity in the life cycle. And then, just like any other products, it can be a product or a version of the product. Then it goes into end of support, end of sales, and of course a replacement, migration from that product. So in the industry, we have called these end of sales. In some cases, we have called it end of software maintenance, right? And then depending on whether it's hardware or software, you may have end of hardware support, end of security support, and then at the end of the day, end of support, and many other terminologies that are out there. So if you pick on major vendors like, of course, Qualys and Cisco and Apple and Microsoft, we do have all very robust and mature processes for product life cycles. Where this becomes very critical and big of a challenge is on open source as well, right? So in open source, there's not even an end of sales, right? You're not, in some cases, selling a piece of open source software. And in many cases, actually, you don't have extended support contracts that you have to obey and so on. So what we're trying to do is a few things. First is trying to address all these N of X into a machine-readable standard that can move at machine speed, and you can determine whether a piece of software or a piece of hardware is end of life, end of support, and also addressing all this taxonomy. What are the common definitions for these very end entities of the life cycle of a product, like whether it's end of sale, an extended of support, and so on, and then provide that guidance to the industry. Now, a bit of a personal story about this one. Last year, I was at the RSA conference at the CERT vendor meeting. So we had about 140 vendors or so, and we were all talking about the Vulnerability Exploitability Exchange. I also lead the Common Security Advisory Frameworks, which is a security standard, for exchanging vulnerability information. And then we also were talking about SBOMs, and then we said, okay, what is next? What is the things that we have to agree and address? And everybody agreed that end of life and end of support and having a good way to manage this was a priority. And the other one, of course, is a lot of the identification of products and, of course, the naming convention. So, of course, we know I started putting, a few things in paper about, the potential creation of a technical committee for addressing this as a standard, as a true standard, right? Not just in isolation from a company like, I will not do this only from a Cisco perspective and so on, but as a standard. And one of the entities that, of course, it was top of mind for everybody is OASIS. And why? Because they are a standards organization that have a lot of additional technical committees and open projects related to cybersecurity, like Stix, Taxi, OpenC2. If you have a phone, and perhaps you don't know this, but if you have a phone and you get an Amber Alert, guess what? An Amber Alert system is an OASIS standard for quite some time, right? And of course, we have a couple of slides in here on the story of OASIS. Before even information codes and QR codes and authentication in there. Now OASIS has a QR-based authentication that is used by many applications, many collaboration entities, and other technical companies as well. The other thing is that even before COVID-19, work began in 2017 at an application called Restier that was then powered by a standard that OASIS created called OData that actually is helping collect information about healthcare facilities and so on. And then, of course, other things like the QR-based authentication and single sign-on, so SAML for single sign-on. That's also an OASIS standard that is very popular nowadays. Everybody's actually using that. And dozens of other standards that you may actually recognize in here, from Stix, Taxi, as I mentioned to you, CSAF, so the Common Security Advisory Framework, MQTT, even Ethereum. Ethereum OASIS is one that is top of mind. Another one that is very, very relevant to security is SERIF, the Static Analysis Results Interchange Format. So another beauty of OASIS is that we actually have a lot of companies actually participating, and even besides companies, a lot of government organizations from CISA, the NSA, and international set of governments, including BSI in Germany, and many, many other companies. And of course, I'm not even scratching the surface with all these logos in here. There are many, many of them that are collaborating to create these new standards and take technology to the next level. Now, so what is OpenEoX again? So why is this even relevant to me? Again, it is an initiative that is trying to standardize the end of life and end of support information and how that is exchanged. And then again, it's covering both vendors and open source maintainers. And basically is to provide transparency and efficiency, because we're trying to do this at machine speed. But what is the significant benefits and what is the play with configuration management databases, or CMDBs, right? The first thing is that we need to enhance accuracy. In many cases, even in commercial implementations and big vendors like Cisco and so on, you may have in through acquisitions and many other integrations, you may have a lot of room for improvement, if I can say, on data models. And of course, if you have inconsistent data models, that can lead into inconsistency of accuracy, right? And the other thing is, of course, you can accelerate automated updates. You can do better proactive lifecycle management. And of course, risk management and compliance is top of mind for most organizations nowadays, and even help you do vendor management. And in the case of vendor management, this applies to a supplier like an open source software. It doesn't have to be a commercial vendor like a Cisco or a Qualys or a Microsoft and so on. And specifically, this applies a lot to open source. A few other benefits and opportunities that we have in here, of course, addressing inconsistency, as I mentioned to you. But because this is machine readable, we're looking at creating schemas that can be very portable. And then instead of reinventing the wheel with product identification and many other things in there, we're trying to integrate this lightweight schema to other standards. So basically, if you already have the representation of what is end of life, end of support, then very easily that can be integrated with other standards like SPDX, Cyclone DX for SBOM, or VEX in the case of CSAF for security advisory. So think about that you are getting security advisories that are machine readable and having detailed information about the status of that product as far as whether it's end of support or end of sales and so on. That is crucial, right? Especially since in many cases, whether it's vendors or open source software, if they reach that milestone of end of support, they will not provide any security patches, and they will not even investigate some security vulnerabilities. So having that awareness both in an SBOM, in a software bill of materials, or in a security advisory definitely can help accelerate a lot of the life cycle of support, support life cycle of a product. Then down below here, I also have a standalone schema. So if you are a vendor or an open source maintainer in the future, right, you can have even a standalone schema that is independent of the operation of as a security advisory or even an SBOM, and where you can expose that through an API. And of course, there's many different use cases, but definitely security is probably the number one use case. And then the planning for migration path. It may be that you are a software developer and you either selected a vendor or a library that is open source, and you want to have an idea of what is going to be my migration path, migrating from these pieces of open source software or this commercial version of a product. That can be definitely incorporated within both the lightweight schema and also the standalone schema as well. Now, we are operating in a very transparent manner. We do have an open GitHub repository, just like most OASIS open projects or technical committees. The one that I'm highlighting, of course, in here is the GitHub repository for the TC. OpenEoX was just launched, late last year, so we're now very active doing the final touches of those two schemas, right? The lightweight schema and the standalone schema as we speak. So the call to action that I have here for you is that get involved. It is an open standard. You will be surprised. Probably your company is already a member of OASIS, so you may even have a way to become a member, a voting member, to actually dictate, what is going to be the future of the standard. I have a few resources in here for you how to get started. One is actually by going to the OpenEoX website. Very easy to remember, openeox.org. We will have all these links available for you. Also, the website for OASIS is OASIS Open. So once you are a member of OASIS, you can actually participate in any of the standards and so on, especially things related to cybersecurity that we're definitely addressing here today. things like Stix, Taxi, OpenC2, Kakao. I mean, there are many, many different movements. Even in the AI front, there are a few different initiatives that we are starting right now that are very relevant for today's conversations, especially whenever it comes to securing AI implementations as well. And then the last one, of course, the GitHub repository that I mentioned to you before. So with that, I really, really appreciate your time. Thank you for having me here today. And I'll invite you to learn more about OpenEoX. Thank you again.